Greetings, ladies and gents. We all know that cold air makes more power, and the stock setup did that pretty well. My new setup requires a new air cleaner, a new mass airflow sensor, and a new cable as I'm pointing at here. It connects in exactly at the original spot. Here's the new setup. The filters from K&N. It's about $30. The mass airflow housing came out of eBay. It's about $80 and does have a straightener on the inside of it. The mass airflow sensor is a first generation slot MAF. It also came off of eBay and it's worth about 20 to 30 bucks off eBay. The new cable came from LMR. It plugs directly into the MAF sensor and directly into the stock housing at the stock location. All these parts make swapping out from the stock setup pretty much a plug and play operation. Obviously, I'm going to have to try to use the stock idea of pulling the air out from in the fender instead of under the hood. This is the material I chose to make my cold air box, to isolate my air filter from the underhood air. A very few of you may have seen my original video. For a refresher course for those who haven't, this was my first attempt at a cold air box. It worked reasonably well as long as the engine was on and the car was moving. When you turn the engine off, it had a tendency to hot soak, and obviously if I was in extended traffic conditions, it would tend to hot soak. The mass airflow sensor seems to start having performance issues around 120 to 140 degrees. Once temperature exceeds that, the engine will barely idle and has a tendency to cut off. Once the car is moving again and the hot air is purged out away from the sensor, the engine performs normally. Obviously, in my case, I decided I need to improve on this design. So here's what I came up with for my design for Cold Box version 2. As an initial baseline, here's what the mass airflow sensor and air filter look like without my cold air box of any kind. The first step on my journey to a new cold air enclosure is to take some measurements and cut some paperboard templates. The line drawn around the templates represents the thickness of the insulation. And here's a view from the engine side looking out at the stock fender opening where the stock air cleaner inlet went through. Now it's time to make a couple prototype templates. Paperboard by far is the best material to use for this, but I didn't have a sheet big enough, so I just went ahead and used cardboard. What I'm trying to make here is a truncated cone. There are several calculators available on the internet that will allow you to calculate this. Then it's just a matter of laying it out and cutting it out and doing a trial fit as I'm doing here. Since I'm hoping to couple it up to an opening that's in the fender well, I don't need the full cone, so I'm going to cut out this section. As we'll see a little later on in the video, here's one place where I goofed. I shouldn't have cut off this last 3/4 inch. Both due to the inflexibility of the insulation in the cardboard, and I wound up about a little bit short and had to go back and add a little backer rod, as we'll see later on in the video. Now I'm going to take my cardboard template and go ahead and mark off the insulation for cutting. In this case, I'll make it a little bit bigger since I'm scoring around the edges of the cardboard. With this material, I found out a good sharp pair of scissors worked better than a sharp knife. It was just easier to cut that way. Now I'll insert it for a trial fit. In this case, it looked pretty good, so it's on to the next step. Now that the main body is done, it's time to make the end pieces. Here's my first template, of course, for the end. I decided to make the new one a little bit larger and then cut it down afterwards. After some more trial fitting, you can see I made another little change here. I tend to round it off a little bit better. Now comes the time to decide how to put it all together. On the previous one, I used liquid nails to put it all together. It proved to be a little bit difficult to get the glue to adhere correctly. On this one, I decided I'd literally sew it all together using curved sewing needles, like crafts needles, and 6-pound fishing line. Here's a shot of the end cap sewed in place. I thought it turned out pretty well. Several things to note here. Obviously, the material is a little bit springy. So in order to hold it in place while I was sewing on it, I clipped it all together using safety pins. In this case, the filter neck opening was cut a little bit small, and I went back and resized it and relocated it after I did a few more measurements. Here's a final shot of the cold air box without the air filter in place, and then another shot with the cold air box with the filter in place. As I said before, I did make a little boo-boo cutting the main housing a little too short. As you can see here, I took a short piece of backer rod and then sewed it to the end of it. Actually, the filter neck is extremely tight on the mouth housing, so a clamp is not required. In order to keep the filter from moving around the housing and to insulate the mouth, I decided to go ahead and wrap the mouth housing with the same material and then wrap that, of course, with tape to hold it in place. This effectively secures the filter in place so it can't move around. And of course, I just removed the tape on the mouth housing to remove the filter from the box, and then I can clean the filter. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, and actually it was easier to do than the first design I showed you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.